All right, dudes. The most important thing I can tell you as we start this video is I have permission to make this video. Classy dudes being classy. All right, a little bit of housekeeping. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share. And if you're into hearing me talk about what I'm into, then be sure to join the Discord. Links below. That's where the conversation continues throughout the week. So there's a church in Brazil that I have been pleased to be a part of. We attended there for a year. A church plant with the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches. And there's something they did when they were founded, more out of a matter of principle, but it paid off in such a big way. I'm pretty sure that a couple of CREC churches have done this, but I wanted to talk about how, we so often do things on principle because it's just the theory of it is what we're going with. In theory, this is right. In theory, this is best. So that's why we're going to do it. It's not practical. And really, I think what recent times have shown us is that, when the crisis comes, having done things as a matter of principle really stands us in good stead. So, I would say the situation with COVID repression in Brazil, culturally and across the nation, has been about equivalent to that in the United States. But of course, there's a different culture in play, and I'm going to do another video about mask culture in the US and mask culture in video. So if you're watching this 2 years later and you're not fighting off zombie hordes in the desolate urban wasteland that you now live in, if instead things have normalized in one way or another, you might think, well, this is not going to be timely. This video is going to be about mask stuff. It's not. It's going to be about living by principle, doing things the right way, or the way that you think is biblically the right way as a community, and then having that pay off. Okay. So when this church in Brazil was founded, as a CREC plant, the men who were leading the church in Brazil decided not to register with the government as a church, but instead to register as a society like any other. So a chess club could be a society, and if they were going to take dues and process funds and have some sort of legal existence, a chess club has to register as something. So a society, great. So this church decided to register as a society, not as a church. Now in Brazil, it's just like in the US. Churches receive tax breaks and special recognitions from the government. But these guys decided they didn't want those things. They wanted the potential freedom. If there were any ever trouble, then they wouldn't be officially a church. Because after all, the government doesn't grant a church the status of being a church. Now, I definitely get behind that principle, but I also believe that a righteous government isn't going to tax the church. And I have no problem with the paperwork that it takes to make that happen. Okay, I just want to praise those who are as clever as serpents. So along came the COVID crisis, and churches shut down in a lot of states in Brazil, and it was pretty universal. More than here, there's less resistance there. There's more church immaturity, spiritual immaturity. The evangelical and Protestant church, although it's been around for 150 years and more in Brazil, really didn't begin to come of age until the 80s, and it hasn't really been a grown-up until the last decade or so. And so, well, that's enough excuse making. Bottom line is, not much resistance from the Brazilian church. Now, I have heard a couple of stories, and all out of the Reformed camp, and I love that as a Reformed Christian myself. But this church in the south of Brazil never stopped meeting. Never stopped meeting. And they never had to worry about anything, because the neighborhood they were in, the type of building they had rented. This is the exterior of the church. No one in the government had them on a list. No one sent them any notifications. No one came to check up on them, because legally they're an association, not a church. I think that's just brilliant. Now, I've met other pastors and church leaders who have been parts of churches that have done similarly. So I'm not saying this is unique, but this is a church that I ran into that I know of, that with this COVID crisis and with this government suppression, repression, that they just flew right by it, right through it, because they combined their force of will and their desire to be faithful with prudence, with foresight, and with living by principle, even when it wasn't necessarily convenient. Right? 5 years ago, any church or Christian school that had said, we don't want to be beholden to the government, well, some would have scoffed. Most would have been smilingly tolerant. Like, there's no real reason except as a matter of exercising some principle, but it's not a big deal. Well, turns out it doesn't take a whole lot to turn it into a big deal. So kudos to those brothers, and consider how you yourself might make some compromises now that might not be expedient later. The peace of Christ be upon you.
Aí sim é um homem de verdade, não é esses troços do grupo não, essas carcaças velhas, uó, fim de carreira.
Cadê você, profeta, autarquia? Hein? Pedrada no inferno, fala comigo aí, matador de demônio. Hein?